Hello, I'm Matthew Gray-Lahu. I'm the Community Development and Engagement Manager at the Listuguj government. I'm here to talk about the election code with you. This is a process that started in 2017, and we're coming back through a re-engagement that started in 2021. One of the things I want to talk to you about is how some of the changes we're doing. So just to give a little format of the format of tonight, it's essentially we're going to start with a small presentation. I ask that you provide your questions after, but you can write them in the chat. We'll get to them after, which is what we're going to do with the question period. Once we get there, I'll try to answer as best as I can the questions you may have related to the election code. If you feel more comfortable, we also have other means of asking questions. So we have an email, electioncodefeedback@listuguj.ca. We have a number. You can even drop by the office and speak to me directly. I gladly look forward to speaking to every member who wants to talk about the election code. I speak about it eagerly. So one of the things I want to mention is this is a digital session, and we understand that it's not the most personal way of interacting with the community, but due to COVID restrictions being put in place, we have to respect COVID guidelines, and because of that, we have to do digital only for now. With the case count going down, to zero, we hope that we'll be able to do in-person sessions relatively soon, and we look forward to seeing the community members in person and hearing feedback directly from them. So I'll just switch to the slides and we'll talk to you after. Welcome to the Listuguj Customary Election Code community session. It is being done digitally right now because of COVID. We hope we'll be able to do community sessions soon if the case counts keep going down. So the topics of today, it'll be a timeline of how this whole process started, where we're at and where we're going, the areas where we need guidance. So these are questions we came up as we worked through this process more. We need more clarity. So it includes the size of council, lengths of term, the roles of councilors, the chief counselor. We're also going to be covering changes that happen in the election code. So this includes the pre-election changes, the nomination fees and candidate criteria, appeals, by-election process, and the review process. And we'll also hit on the importance of engagement in this whole process. So the whole Listuguj Customary Election Code started in 2017 when council passed an OIC mandating that they wanted the development to start. It was a community-driven mandate, community-driven development. They wanted something that was representative of the will of the community. So in 2018, they started doing community sessions, and from those sessions, they were able to draft a customary election code. This was the first draft. The community consultations were put on hold. The whole process was shelved for temporarily. And then COVID happened, which caused the delay to be extended, which led to the 2021 recommitment, which is where we're currently at, which led to this round of community consultation. So we're re-engaging the community and seeing what they think about the whole draft, the whole election code. We want to hear what the community has to say. We understand that it's been a while, so people have to get reacquainted with it. But from this round of consultations, we hope we can get important changes, make modifications, and then in the future do follow-up rounds of consultations. And keep doing that until we get to something we think is a strong code that represents the will of the community, and then we can bring it to referendum for the community to decide whether or not they want to adopt it. But through this process, we've found areas where we need guidance. So there was trends we saw that the community want changes, but not specific enough for us to know what changes to make. So an example of this is the proper number of counselors. We know that there's a will amongst the community to reduce the number of counselors, but we don't know to reduce at what number. So how many counselors should there be? Should it be 8, 6, 10, or 4? We don't know. And this is why we're coming back to the community to try to focus that even more so we know what number to go with. The same for the length of term. We want to know how long should it be. We saw that the community wants an increased term, but is it 3 years, 4 years, 5 years more? We need more clarity on that. Next, there was the full or part-time counselors. The issue was brought up in the community sessions and also brought up in the survey that we did. And what and how the role of counselor should be. Should it be full-time or part-time? What should they do in that part-time, if they're full-time, excuse me? And if they should exercise their jobs, and whether or not they should take a leave of absence or resign from their current employment to serve as full-time counselors. Speaking of counselors, that led to a conversation about the role of the chief counselor. It was brought up and it was a change made in the previous draft and exists in this current draft as well, but it was never really well communicated to the community that the current role of chief counselor is one that's honorific and has no actual powers. So a chief counselor, as they currently exist, are not different from a regular counselor. In the current election code, like the draft, the chief counselor has replacement powers. So if the chief were to be incapacitated and unable to do their job or removed, the chief counselor would take over. That wasn't clearly identified with the community, this replacement power, so we wanted to make sure that they're well aware of what it meant before they have we ask for their opinion. So in the survey, we clearly detail what the powers would be, and then we ask a series of questions. We would also like to hear what you have to say. If you have any questions or comments about this, please feel free to let us know. We'll be doing a question and answer after this, obviously. So please, if you have any questions, type them out in the chat. So just to cover some of the changes first. So the pre-election changes. One of those is a simple candidate criteria. We weren't able to set our candidate criteria in the Indian Act, but with this election code, we're able to have one that represents what the community members want. So I'll just read them through quickly. The candidate must be a member of the Listuguj band, must have Listuguj Mi'kmaq ancestry, must be 18 years of age or older, cannot have been convicted of a criminal offense within 5 years prior to the date of the election. So just to put that simpler, they can't have been convicted of a crime 5 years before the election. If it's 6 years, they're fine. They cannot have been removed from office pursuant to this election code 3 years prior to the election, to the date of the election. Once again, to put it simpler, if you were removed from office, you have to wait 3 years to run again for office. This is to make sure that if someone is removed from office, they can't then run in the by-election for the position they were just removed from. They cannot be the CEO or the electoral officer or the deputy electoral officer. This is for conflict of interest reasons, because the CEO, the electoral officer, and the deputy electoral officer would all have powers over the process of the election. So nomination fees are something that was an idea that was floated amongst the community sessions. And I think the goal of this is to try to make sure that only serious candidates run for the election. However, this is not a change that we fully incorporated. We've tried to modify it a bit to include an option that is non-monetary to make sure that we don't create unfair barriers to people running as candidates. So the nomination process also stays the same. So a candidate has to be nominated and have a second to be a candidate. And this can happen at the nomination meeting or via mail. Once they're nominated, candidates would have to pay a fee, $200 for counselor and $400 for chief, or obtain signatures of electors, 20 for counselor and 50 for chief, supporting their nomination. I will mention the numbers here, like the fee, are not fixed in stone. They're just placeholders that we put to have discussions with the community. We want to see, is this too high? Is it not high enough? Is the non-monetary option something they enjoy, and is that how they want to proceed? Once again, I encourage you to fill out the survey because that's where we ask these questions and see what the community has to say about this process. So accountability is actually an important part of the election code, and it creates two bodies, the election appeal and the removal appeal. I'll cover the first right now. So the election appeal process is a 3-board member that will review any appeals that someone has related to the election itself. So let's say the results of an elections are announced. You have 15 days to challenge the election based on the following grounds. You believe fraud or corrupt practices occurred during the election and that undermined the election process or changed the outcome of the vote. The electoral officer made an error in the counting of the ballots, or a candidate was found to be ineligible for the position they were nominated for, even if they were not elected. It's just to make sure that the people, only the proper candidates are able to run. So once the appeal board receives this appeal, they will then review it and see whether or not they reject or accept the appeal. If they reject the appeal, the election results stay, no changes are made. If they do confirm the appeal, they can order a new election for the specific position in question, or order a whole new election. This, however, does not give new terms to the newly elected people. They are just going to serve out the remainder of the term for the people they're replacing. Now, this brings up removal appeal process. This is the accountability mechanism that exists after the election process. So it's the same 3-member board. It can be triggered, and a removal process can be triggered by an OIC, order in council, or a petition that is signed by 25% of the electorate plus 1. So that means 25% of the electors plus another elector. And that's to make sure that accountability mechanisms are open to the community and not just council. So a member of council can be removed if they violate the code of conduct, violate the conduct of candidates, which is part of the election code. It's included in it. Highly recommend, if you want more information on that, to go read the election code. Or a candidate can also, a member of council can also be removed if they refuse to sign their oath of office, or based on this version of the election code, refuse to resign or take a leave from their employment as required by the election code. So once again, similar to the previous process, the board receives the appeal and the evidence, and they can either reject or accept it. If the appeal is accepted, the position or positions are declared vacant and a by-election may be held. I'll explain why a by-election may be held and is not always necessarily held. And that has to do with the structure of by-elections, which is the next subject we're covering. So by-election and the review process. So by-elections occur only if it's prior to a year before the next election is held. So that's, to explain that clearer, if someone were to leave council a year minus a day, so like slightly just before a year, there would be a by-election. But if they were to leave a year minus a day, so like after that 1-year threshold, there would not be a by-election. And that's the position would just remain vacant. And if the person is elected with just a year left, they serve that year. They don't get a 4-year mandate. So the by-election is just to replace the position. And they serve out the term. It is not a new election. They're not getting a 4-year mandate. It's very much just finishing up the other person's mandate that they're replacing. So the election code is a living document. Like, we want it to be able to adapt and change to the needs of the community. And as such, a process had to be developed to allow for it to be modified. And this process is the review process. So a General Assembly has to be called. It is the mechanism that is what makes these changes happen. So these General Assemblies can be called by a petition with 25% plus 1 of the electors, or an order in council, and has to happen at least a year prior to the next election. So at the General Assembly, The proposed amendments are written down, so anyone who attends can propose amendments, and they're voted on at the General Assembly. They can be voted on in person or online, and they require at least 150 electors, so voters, to support it before they move on to a referendum. Once the amendment reaches the 150 threshold, council will review it and modify the proposed amendment to make sure that it is written in a way that is legal. And once that cleanup is done, it is voted on in a referendum. If it passes referendum, the amendment, the referendum requires the majority of vote to pass. The amendment will be included in the new version of the election code. So the election code is modified to include the amendment, and then it is then shared with the community. A new version will be put online, will be also available at the LMG administration building. So this brings us to the most important part of this whole process, engagement. We really need your feedback. The election code was from the get-go a community-driven process. It is us that are selecting our leaders. We have to be involved in this process. We need to hear from other members of the community. We want something that represents what the community wants. As such, I really encourage you to have a discussion with your friends and families and encourage them to participate in the process, because we want to hear from everyone. We want to hear criticism. We want to hear support. We want to hear everything. We want to hear as many voices as possible. For us, it is extremely important to hear what people have to say. We know it's not a perfect document. We know there's modifications that have to be made to it. And we want to hear what those modifications are, or where the community thinks there's some issues or areas that are problematic or areas that they like, so we can try to maybe improve upon that. We want it to be a document that is by the community and for the community. And it is for that reason that we have multiple ways of contact. You can come into the LMG building and come talk to me. My name is Matthew Graylahu. I'm the Community Development and Engagement Manager. So if you come in, ask for me. We also have an email set up, the election code feedback@listuguj.ca. Feel free to send us emails. I am the only person who sees them. You can just email me and I'll read it. I'll try to convey that information to the rest of the committee to make sure that the information, but I will make sure the information remains anonymous. Same thing for phone calls. Call, leave a voicemail if I'm not there, or talk to me directly if I'm able to answer. I will pass on the information as well, and we'll try to incorporate all the comments and feedbacks as best we can into the election code. Speaking of which, I encourage everyone to visit listuguj.ca and go look for the election code materials. Just look on the homepage for the election code tab. There you'll find all the materials, videos explaining some of the changes. It's very similar to this presentation. A word from our chief, but also, most importantly, our survey. This is for us the main way of trying to gather information and pointing out to the community what are areas we believe we need to hear from. It's also where you'll find all the rest of our contact information, and we highly encourage you to participate. We highly encourage that you encourage other people to participate. We need to hear from everyone, and we want to hear from everyone. I think together the community will be able to develop a code that really reflects what we want and allows us to have a better system that works for us. I thank you very much for your time. We'll be doing the Q&A after this. Thank you very much. So now we'll move on to the question and answer period. We actually already have a question, so I'm just going to jump right in. We were asked, how does the off-reserve vote work? The off-reserve vote will be done through a process, through a program called Simply Vote. They are the system we used when we did the referendum on the cannabis bylaw, excuse me. It's also been used by other First Nations to conduct their elections during COVID, and it has a good track record. So that's the process we're going to be using for that. If you have any more questions, please put them in the chat. We'll keep going as long as people have questions. I would also stress the importance of the survey. I know I mentioned it in the slides, but I can't stress it enough. It's the main way we're going to get feedback from the community. We very much would appreciate if you participate in the survey found on the Listuguj website. You find the election code tab on the front page. It'll be simply found there. And if you can encourage other members of your family or friends to participate as well, we appreciate that. We want to hear from everyone. It's a message we keep saying, but it's because we can't stress it enough. The importance of community engagement is essential. If it doesn't have to be a question either, if there's a part that you didn't understand or need clarity on, please feel free to provide it, ask for clarity. It's not the most interesting of topics, but some of it can be explained relatively easily. But if you wish to have more of your own research and all that, you can go and find the election code on the website and go read it for yourself. It's, we'll say, entertaining to read. I don't understand that question in the code itself, not for the referendum. Oh, sorry, I understand now. So off reserve voting will continue to be similar as it is right now. It's mail-in ballots. So when someone wants to vote and lives off reserve or wants to do a mail-in, they can request a mail-in ballot. It'll follow the same process. Well, not the same process, a process similar to the current process where the electoral officer and the deputy electoral officer will provide that person a mail-in ballot. It'll be signed, and then when they receive the filled-in ballot, they keep it in a secure location, and it'll be counted on election night. Sorry, I assumed you meant referendum. Just waiting on more questions. So we'll be taking questions for another 10 minutes, and after that, we'll probably call it a night if everyone has been properly answered. Also, I would like to say a big thank you for participating. We understand this isn't the optimal way of discussing a subject like the election code, but it is the best we can do right now, and we hope we will be able to do community sessions very shortly and get direct feedback from the community. Oh, as was mentioned in the chat, the customary election code is available on the LMG website. We also have a small summary to have people be able to read it and understand the big components of it, and not have to read the whole document itself. It's a pretty dry document, but there are changes that we would like to see. Yeah. Yes, I am actually looking forward to the in-person sessions as well. It's much better than looking at a camera to look at someone and speak to them. So I guess as we wait, I might talk about some of the things I always thought about when it came to the election code. For me, it was always the number of counselors. When we looked into it, I when we were looking at the data, we wanted to see what people wanted, and we were able to find like big trends. So, like I mentioned in the slides, the trend people wanted less counselors, and but now it's like finding out that right number. I have my own personal opinions on all that, but we want to make sure that the community has an opinion, like, and gives us that opinion. We're able to work on it. So a little bit of the background. I started working here in September, and one of my first jobs was the election code. And I read it quite a lot, and it is interesting the way it's written right now. And I do see there are a lot of things we need the community to help us with. Oh, sorry, I got a question. So did the amount of council change from the last version? No, so it didn't. The number that they're using though is one that was not definitive. It was sort of like a good middle ground. So 8, it's not the answer that, like, not to go into the data too much, but it was one that had a plurality of the votes, but not the majority of the votes. And that's why we want to get more concrete answer from the community to truly see if that's what they want. There's also good middle ground from the proposed like 6, that was one of the answers, and the current 12. That way it would show a reduction, but not one that'd be too much. It is also a working draft, so a lot of the numbers and the amounts in the current draft are for discussion purposes. It's to show how it would work. A perfect example of that is the nomination fee. The $200 nomination fee is not final, but it's one that was set to start a discussion. The non-monetary option, the 20 votes for a counselor, not 20 votes, sorry, 20 signatures, is one that was to see how would people react to that. Is that a good threshold? We want to hear from the community whether or not that's a right amount, too high, too low, or whether or not they even want a fee still. Because I remember I actually participated as a participant at these sessions when it first started, and that was the thing. It was during a time where there was a lot of people running for council, and it was getting hard to start picking 12 people because it was just a sea of candidates, and there was a sentiment of trying to figure out a way to make sure that the people who were running really wanted to run. So this way, is this maybe too much? Actually, the educational requirements, basic high school or GED, would at least ensure all council members can read and write. Yeah, that might be a thing. We haven't heard that from community yet, but that is something we could look into. It'd be interesting to see what the community has to say about that. These are actually part of I've had conversations one-on-one with members of the community, and it's quite interesting, the insights and the ideas the community has. There's some very interesting ideas out there, and we're open to hearing all of them. We might not be able to incorporate all of them in this round of the election code, but it's stuff that, because it'll require a lot of thought and work, that we might not have. But one of the things we want to do is to maybe start working on those so that they can be added as amendments later on, and researched and given the due diligence that they deserve. But the community has a lot of good ideas, and we would love to hear them. Nope. Apologize. There's something happening in the hallway. It's a little loud. So I will reiterate, because I just saw a new person just join The survey, for us, that's a vital tool. We hope everyone will fill it out. I highly encourage. It can be found on listuguj.ca on the election code tab on the front page. You'll also find all the election code materials, brief summary, and also the actual working draft. I encourage everyone to go take a look. Yeah, and this presentation will also be available there. And we also create a little, a pair of videos that break down some of the components. It covers a lot of the material that we covered tonight, but in a nicer version. Because PowerPoint is great and all, but the video, the team here did a good job, and I think it is better than PowerPoint. Yeah.
Ask a question.
Oh, if anyone had any questions or comments or even required clarity on specific parts of the election code, please put them in the chat. Also, I will reiterate, if you do not feel comfortable with putting them in the chat, you could always email us at electioncodefeedback@listuguj.ca. You can call me. You just call LMG, and they will forward you to me. If I'm not there, leave a voicemail. I will get back to you. You can also drop in. For us, in person is great. I want to hear from the communities, and if they prefer one-on-one dialogue, I'll gladly have that. I always relish the opportunity to speak with community members. It's much better, like I said, than speaking to a camera. Yeah, so we're going to wrap up in the next 5 minutes if we don't get any more questions. But once again, I'll thank you again for participating. We know it's not ideal way to engage the community, but due to COVID, we had to make some choices and try to get the conversation started now. And we hope we'll be able to do in person soon enough, and we'll be able to really jump into it and already have started a momentum built up. Oh, and if you bump into me, please stop me. We'll have a good discussion about the election code. Maybe long, so maybe set aside some time for that. I like to talk about it. Yeah, so we're also going to be doing a number of engagements just to provide a bit more background as to how we're reaching out to the community. We're actually going to be doing sessions with employees of LMG through their directorates. We want to reach out as many people as possible, and this, I think, is a great way. We understand that it's hard to set aside time to come do engagement sessions during the week. It's hard to compete against people's regular lives, family, cooking for your family, just relaxing from a long day. So we want to try to get people during their working hours so that they're able to participate but not have to carve out time for it. We're trying to make this process as easy as possible for everyone because we want to get as many voices as possible. So if you are already, if you work for LMG, I might be seeing you soon enough. Yeah, so just 2 more minutes and then we'll wrap up.
So I want to just thank you everyone who participated and those who asked questions. I very much appreciate it. I will once more, for final time, suggest you go fill out the survey, and I strongly encourage those who participated to speak with their friends and families about the election code. This is a matter of self-governance, about discovering what our community wants and how it wants to govern itself. This whole process is community driven, so we have to hear from the community. We understand it's the time of COVID. It's a little complicated due to digital only, but we believe we can get the ball rolling, and we can start having a good discussion. We want to talk with the community as much as possible because we want to make sure the election code we do have represents what the community wants and what the community needs. So once more, I thank you very much for participating in today's live stream. Once more, if you need any more information or want to read the code for yourself, visit listuguj.ca. You'll find the election code tab on the front page. Click it, it'll bring you to where all the materials are, and it'll give you the videos, and it'll give you a message from the chief, and our survey, most importantly. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. We'll hope to discuss this with you later.